realfaith.org.au.
I phoned them and I just said, well, you're going to northern Iraq? And they said, yes. And I said, well, I'm 50 and I said, I want to come if I can. So they said, come. And I was feeling, I'm stupid. This is ridiculous. What am I doing with all these young people? And so I made a pact with God. I just said, look, if I'm not happy by the end of this week, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going back home. And he made me happy.
Welcome to Real Faith. Conversations about the impact faith has on our lives and the challenges we go through, helping us today and giving us hope for tomorrow. That's real people, real life, and real faith with Eric Scatterbo.
In 1991, Gloria Hardy was feeling very disgruntled with her life. She was a 51-year-old swim coach whose children were now adults, and she was wondering, how could God use me? All I know is swimming. That all changed one night when she saw a news story reporting on the desperate plight of the Kurdish people in northern Iraq, who had had their homes bombed by Saddam Hussein. Gloria decided to get involved. She's written about her adventures in her book called The Master's Touch, and she'll be sharing her inspiring story with us today. Gloria Hardy, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
And where are you joining us from today?
From Pakenham. That's where I live.
That's right. So the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne. Welcome to the program. And we want to find out about all the adventures you had in Iraq. But first, let's go back to where it all started. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Bentley.
So not far from where you're living now, is that right?
Oh, it's a little way. It's about a 3/4 of an hour in the car.
But southeast of Melbourne.
Oh, yes, for sure.
In that general area. Okay, so what was life like growing up in your home?
It was very basic. We didn't have a lot, but I had all my needs met. Had a beautiful mother who's Christian, and we spent most of our time down the beach, and that's all I needed, is just the water.
Yes, so swimming was a part of your life from an early age.
That's right, very early age. I can never remember learning to swim.
Now, let's go back to 1942, because that plays a part in your story as well.
Yes, it does.
What happened in 1942?
Well, 42, my father was sent away to war, and my mother was left to sort of manage the household things, and she had, as most people did back here, a very difficult time. And we did have the land in Bentley at the time, but the house was going to be built on this land that my parents had bought in Bentley. And my mother wanted the house to be built further back on the block. And the builders had their own way because my father wasn't around, and they built it further forward, which to my mother's disappointment. But we didn't realise at the time that that's when God had everything in control. So in 1962, we were able to build our swimming school because the house was not built further back. It was built forward, and we had the room to do it.
Wow. So what was a disappointment to your mother at the time turned out to be a blessing in disguise.
Yes. That's
okay.
Right.
But we're kind of getting ahead of the story. Let's find out about you getting involved in swimming and being a champion.
Yes. Well, as I was always involved in swimming down the beach, and I joined a club down there, and then I realised that, or my mother realised that I needed more help with my swimming, so I joined the Olympic Club, and then found that there wasn't really good training in Victoria, so I ended up going to riding my motor scooter to Adelaide in 1959 to do training under Harry Gallagher, Dawn Fraser's coach.
That's right. But you had been the champion for Victoria, is that right?
Oh, yes. I was Victorian champion then and record holder, but I knew that I could do better if I had better training. So that's where I spent my time in Adelaide training with a much more organised squad. Yes.
So it was your goal to go to the Olympics in Rome in 1960?
My goal was to go to the 1960 Rome Olympics. And
so you hung out and trained with Dawn Fraser?
Yes, we trained together. She had a motor scooter like I, and we did all sorts of things together. We were good mates, but yes, later on I did have 3 very bad accidents, which stopped stopped me from being able to train.
So your dream of going to the Olympics didn't come about because of these injuries?
Yes, the injuries, yeah.
So that must have been devastating to you.
No, it certainly was. Yeah, I felt my whole world had crushed. Yeah, so that's when I decided to come home, and my mother, having a beautiful faith and always ready to stimulate me, she said, "How about building a swimming school?" And I thought,
just like that?
Yes. Yeah, just like that. And I said, oh, that's a good idea.
So that must have been very frustrating that Dawn Fraser, you're seeing her on TV winning all these medals, and you're thinking, wow, that could have been me.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I could have been there, but wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, yep. So meanwhile, your mother had a good idea.
Yes, and a lot of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And we believed we could do it, and we did it. And the first year we had it open air, wasn't heated, was very basic, and we were that busy, we decided we didn't close and heat it because we could then use it the whole year round, so it became an indoor heated pool.
Oh, okay. So this was your full-time job?
Oh, yes, yeah. More than full-time.
Oh, more than full-time, okay.
Oh, it's flat out.
Yeah, so you enjoyed that for many years?
Oh, yes, it was 28 years we ran that, yeah.
So that was very successful. We're going to fast forward in your life.
Things were going okay. But then I had a divorce, and that was probably the worst part of my life, where I just felt like the ground had opened up and swallowed me. And then I got very ill. I was losing consciousness and discovered I needed a pacemaker, and caused really through shock. And on my way to hospital, my mother was driving me to get the pacemaker. We put it on the radio, it was a Christian radio, and the first little text for the day was, "The Lord is my pacemaker, I shall not rush." And I knew God was right in, because I was going into hospital to have a pacemaker.
So this was a low point in your life, as you mentioned.
Very,
this was
very low.
right after your marriage broke up. You're having these health problems, but you knew...
And I had to sell my business then, so everything went kaput.
Oh, okay. So what was your faith before then? You said your mother was a strong Christian, but had you been a Christian all these years?
Oh, yes. I've just grown up as a child, being used to going to Sunday school. It's been just a gradual growth with me. But I got baptised when I was 14, and I've just been involved with youth groups and just jogged along, and that's how God took hold of me.
But at this point, your life was really rocked because you intended to be married for the rest of your life. So this was really a shock to you.
I don't like divorce, so I was not even going to get divorced. It was only my ex-husband's choice, and I had no choice but to go along with it.
Okay, so your life is kind of falling apart, I guess you could say. Marriage breaks up, health problems. You lost your business. You sold your business.
Yep.
And then you heard that on the radio, which encouraged you about getting your pacemaker. You knew God was in control. And then you kind of had that conversation with God, asking him, what can he do with swimming?
That's exactly what happened. What can you do with swimming? It's useless.
So you thought.
Yeah, so I thought,
Our guest today is Gloria Hardy, who's the author of the book, The Master's Touch, about the many adventures she's gone on serving the Lord. As we're hearing today, it all started when she was in her 50s and thought to herself that there was no way that God could use a 51-year-old swim coach. We'll find out the remarkable way that God changes her mind when we return, right here on Real Faith.
The Word for Today is Australia's most widely read daily devotional, designed to give you practical teaching to keep you focused on your relationship with Jesus. Read it online or subscribe to the free printed edition at thewordfortoday.com.au.
You're listening to Real Faith, conversations with real people about how God works in their lives. If you want to know more about integrating faith into your life, our website is realfaith.org.au. Just go to the website and you'll find helpful articles about the impact faith can have on your life. Once again, that's realfaith.org.au.
Welcome back. I'm Eric Scatabo, and today I'm chatting with Gloria Hardy, who's the author of the book, The Master's Touch, about the many adventures she's gone on serving the Lord. Today we're learning about how it all began when she mistakenly thought that there was no way that God could use a 51-year-old swim coach. Now here's more of Gloria sharing her story.
I ended up going into missions, and in each country I've been in, I was asked, would I please take a swimming program for either orphans or doctors, and I found I was still passing my skills on to these people in third world countries, and God was just proving to me that he can use anything if we're willing to allow him to do it.
Amen. And then also you became involved in master swimming. What is that?
Yes, I became involved in that when I first started Masters in Victoria.
What is master swimming?
Well, it's the seniors, really, and they swim in all different sports, compete in 5-year age groups, and it goes right up to 100 if you can last that long.
So you were competing against people your own age?
But yeah, 5-year age groups, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so and you were in your 50s at this point with a pacemaker.
I joined it when I was 50, yes. So then I hadn't been really training or keeping myself very fit all those years when I was running the swim school. I was too busy. But then I took it up again and started to join a club, Masters Club, and that got me going.
And then you won in international competitions in Canada, England, Japan, Hawaii. So you went all over the place.
All over the place.
Yeah, and we're winning, even though you had a pacemaker. Apparently your health improved. That's
right, yeah. I was able to do that, yeah. But the doctor has advised me now, because I'm not as good, my heart is not as good as it was, that I shouldn't be stressing it as much as I did.
Okay. So you're not swimming anymore. But
I am swimming, but not competitively.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all need to use our bodies, and swimming is a beautiful exercise. And if we don't use it, we lose it. It's like an engine. It needs to be oiled.
Oh, yes, very much so. And a Bible verse that was instrumental in your life was Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Why was that so instrumental in your life?
Oh, well, it's just that God has got everything in control. We've got to learn to trust him. That if we can't see what he's got there for us, just have faith and trust that he is guiding you the way you need to go, and just follow that way, and you will eventually come out the other end. It might take a long time.
Now, we started this conversation hearing about how you questioned God. What can you do with swimming? And wanted to know what direction would happen in your life. Then you saw the plight of the Kurds in northern Iraq. Tell us what happened. How did God tug your heart?
Yes, well, that really didn't have anything to do with swimming at the time. It was that I was watching television in 1991, and this shocking picture came on the screen of just exactly what the Kurds had to do when their homes were ruined, and they had to get out of and go up the mountains, because the Kurdish people say, the mountains are their only friends, and that's where they're really mountain people. And as I was talking with one person who was involved in this when it happened, he took his own mother and father up into the mountains, and he had to go by, he had a car at the time, because people all had cars. They were doing quite well before all this attack. And he had to take his elderly parents up in the snow. And this picture I saw on television was these families sitting around fires. They had a fire burning and they were trying to warm their hands. And they were sitting in the snow. They had no food, just nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. They had no shelter, and they just ran up there. And that's when I said, somebody's got to help them.
Wow. So God tugged your heart. Now, setting the historical context a bit, this was after the Gulf War. So Iraq, Saddam Hussein lost that war to the coalition. And then after the war was over, he began to bomb the Kurds in northern Iraq. Is that correct? So that's why they had to flee to the hills?
They had everything taken from them. He even filled, because they all operated on wells, because you can get water there if you can dig 30 feet or so down. Yeah. And they were doing that, and they all had their own wells and had wheelbarrows and, spades and things they could use. But then everything was taken from them, and the wells were all filled in deliberately so that they couldn't get water and any tools. They had no tools. So the first time we were there, that's what our men were doing, digging wells and getting the water back for them.
Yeah, I guess getting back to the historical context, Saddam Hussein lost that Gulf War in the early 90s, and he didn't want the Kurds to get in their minds that they could take advantage of the situation and have independence and have their own country or something like that. So he wanted to make sure that they were put down. And as you saw on TV, he was putting them down, bombing and filling in their wells and just really making their lives miserable. So you saw that on TV and you said, hey, I need to help. Is that basically what happened?
That's what started me,
So what do? You're in the Melbourne area. You're watching TV. How do you get involved in something in northern Iraq?
Well, I was involved with Youth with a Mission. Well, I was in contact with them at times, and I heard that they were going to do. They were doing a course with an outreach into northern Iraq.
Oh, there you go.
And it was for young people, and I was 50 at the time.
Yeah.
And so they were there. Their base was in Goulburn. And so I phoned them and I just said, well, you're going to northern Iraq? And they said, yes. And I said, well, I'm 50. I'm not a young person, because young people that they were getting in to do all this digging and rebuilding for them. And I said, I want to come if I can. So they said, come. So I joined up with it and did a 3-month course in Goulburn to train as to culture and whatever. And then off we went. I went with a whole lot of young people. And when the first week that I went to Goulburn, I thought, this is crazy. All these young people under 20.
Were you the only person there over 50?
I was, yeah. And I was feeling, I'm stupid. This is ridiculous. What am I doing with all these young people? And so I made a pact with God. I just said, look, if I'm not happy by the end of this week, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going back home. Yeah. And he made me happy.
Well, understandably, you would kind of feel out of place because you're the only older person there. But as time went on, you kind of became the mother figure to a number of the kids.
That's exactly what I was going to say to you. Yeah. They needed a mother, and they were coming to me with all sorts of things. And so that did it.
So you felt needed.
Yes, that's right.
So you had a role to play, and you could really help them.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So you continued on with the training and eventually went to Iraq?
Yes, with them, yeah.
What happened when you got to, first you went to Turkey, is that right?
Oh, well, you've got to go. We had a 44-hour transit to get into Iraq. And if you have about a couple of hours, I can tell you the story. But it was a horrific time to have to get there. It was 5 planes and waiting at airports, 44 hours, and absolutely exhausted by the time we got there. But we had to fly into Turkey, and then we had to catch a Turkish plane across to a place called Diyarbakir, which is very east in Turkey. And when you get off, you know that you're in a war zone because there's tanks and everything, people around with guns, everybody carrying Kalashnikovs, and you think, wow. Yeah. It was the real eye-opener. And so then we had to have an 8-hour journey in a little bus, to get into Iraq. And then we had to cross the border from Turkey to Iraq, and that was a big procedure. You go through that many checkpoints, and it was very traumatic, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say, here you are, somebody from the Melbourne suburbs, and now you're going into a war-torn country, and you're seeing tanks and guns, and eventually you heard fighting in the distance. Did you ever say to yourself, what in the world am I doing here?
No, I didn't quite say that to myself. I probably had, I just had my goals, that I've got to go in and help these people.
Mm-hmm. And you felt God wanted you there?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
What about your children? What did they think about you going there?
Well, they're in their 20s.
At that point?
And they're very supportive, although my pastor thought I had rocks in my head, and his wife says, "Aren't you frightened?" And I looked at her and I thought, it never occurred to me that I'd be frightened. I was not frightened. It just
really
amazing. It was just amazing. Yeah.
Now, do you think that was because you had the peace of God?
Oh, undoubtedly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
You knew this is where you were supposed to be.
That's where I should be. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's pick up the story. You're just entering into Iraq. Then what happened?
Well, our team was divided in two, and half the team stayed in the main city of Zako, which is just across the border, and the rest of us, there was 4 of us, had to travel another 3.5 hours to a little town called Shiladiza. And we got quite surprised that that's where we didn't have any buildings to be comfortably sleeping in. We had a summer tent and army bunks, and we'd travel each week on weekends down to the main city where the rest of the team were, just to be together as a team, and then for the next week we'd come back again to our tents again. So
now let me just say this. I recently went camping and I barely survived 2 or 3 days in the heat. You were there for weeks at a time, and it got up to 50. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Oh my goodness!
But it's not a oppressive heat. It's dry heat.
Oh, okay. Still hot.
it's hot, I can tell you.
Yeah,
and there's just nowhere else to turn, and you just think, all right, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
We had a little tin shed as a toilet, and we had that was where we had our splash water over ourselves to have a wash.
Yeah, very basic.
Very, very basic.
Yeah.
And we were handing out, because we were alongside a very organised Kurdish tent, they were handing out building supplies for the people so that they could rebuild their homes. So we joined in with helping them.
So you were part of another ministry. You were just aiding them. Is that right?
Yeah, we joined in with the Kurdish people to help distribute this building material. And then
so they could rebuild their lives.
That's right, yeah. And we hopped in and did building with them and just slapped on the mortar with our hands. We had nothing else to do it with but our hands. Our hands got very nice and smooth putting this mortar on. But one thing that sticks out in my mind so much is that, because we had basic food when we were in this camp, and one day I just said, oh, if only we could have some milk and eggs. Do you know, there was a little sort of a wayside stop, and they had a few odd things in there. So we wandered down there, and when I walked in the door, here was a dozen eggs sitting on a bench. There was hardly anything else in there. And then I looked across on a shelf, and I've still got the label. There was a tin sitting up on the shelf, and it had in big writing Gloria on it. And here I am in a place that speaks nothing else but Arabic and writes nothing else but Arabic.
Yeah.
And here I'm reading Gloria. And so I got the eggs and that tin because I just felt like that tin did belong to me. And when we got back and opened it, it was condensed milk.
So you wanted eggs and milk, and God provided it for you, and even put your name on it.
That's right. Yes.
Fantastic. So he was meeting your needs.
Get over that. Even now, I can't get over that.
Yeah.
I've still got the label.
Oh, do you? Oh, okay. Well, that was part one of my conversation with Gloria Hardy, who's the author of the book, The Master's Touch, about the many adventures she's gone on serving the Lord. As we heard today, it all started off with her ministering to the Kurdish people in northern Iraq, which was still a war-torn country at that time. And to think, just before being called by God to go there, she was thinking to herself, how could God use me? I'm just a swim coach. But then God showed her all the remarkable ways he could use a swim coach and all the other remarkable things he had in store for her that she didn't even know she could do. We'll hear more of Gloria's inspiring story next time. And until then, I'm Eric Scadabo. So long, and God bless.
You've been listening to Real Faith, and if you have any questions or comments, you can send us a message through our website, realfaith.org.au. That's realfaith.org.au.
Real Faith is a production of Vision Christian Media.
This program is a production of Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, see vision.org.au.